Alright, now this book is, once again, they're all pretty thick, so that's why I did them in two books. But this is about my grandmother, picking up from this book. So this is obviously my Grandpa Gene's book. And then this is more about my Grandma Betty. And this is her parents, their information and wedding date. I made this picture once again. I don't know if you could tell. Okay, so there's about my grandmother's dad. Just a little bio of him before he met Lucille. Or, not Lucille. Before he met Lillis. There we go. And there's my great-grandma Lillis, a letter that she had written, and I just copied off a little bio on her. And then their children. They had one child who unfortunately died when he was quite young, less than a year. This is my Grandma Betty, naked, her birth certificate. Baptism. They were a good Mormon family. I lived in Utah. Then my grandmother's brother, Walter. And then these are just pictures of them growing up. You can see, tried to go chronological once again, get as many pictures in here as I could. It was neat blowing some of these up because some of them, many of them were just tiny, and I was able to blow them up and really see their faces and capture more detail that way. This grandfather also worked at the dam. There's the Grand Coulee Dam behind him. I have a long, long history of dam workers. Haha. More information going up. Getting towards my grandmother's graduation. There's their little family group sheet. All the information about them that I could get. Okay, family tree time. So grandma, her siblings, their parents, her parents, his parents. You can see we're doing this, makes it a little less confusing. So here's a little bit of my grandmother from younger to older, her family, her kids. Same with my great uncle Walter, his kids, his wife. A little bit more about Lillis and Ross's retirement, grandchildren. And then his obituary, funeral handout, my grandmother's obituary, their headstone, and then my great uncle's obituary as well. It's my Grandma Betty's brother. So then I move on to my Grandpa Leon Ross's side of the family. So that's his parents and him. That photo was taken in around 1900. So here's a little bit about her. That's the only picture we have of her when she was younger, so that got included on her page, and I won't go any farther back than that because that's it. More pictures of her. She's very pretty. That is John Lee Allen, a picture of him when he was an infant. I do have a lot more info on him, but just kind of did it the same way as the way I did hers. Pictures, a few pictures of him. And then I went back to them and their children. So this is my Grandpa Leon Ross when he was a baby, a little bit older. There he is with his older brother. This was a postcard thing from his school or it's actually not a postcard, it's a card they mailed out. Pretty cool, 1907. Let's see, headstones. This is her headstone. She passed away giving birth to their third child. And then he remarried. I don't normally include remarriages, but there's a lot of great pictures of him. And they never had any children together, which is, yeah, I usually don't include that if they haven't had any children together, but it was part of his specific story. So she helped raise his children, obviously, from a young age, one from an infant. So pictures of them. Pictures of his store. He was a pretty great man. He owned a store in, I think it was Missouri. Yeah, anyways. So yeah, then here is my Grandpa Leon Ross as a teenager. I didn't have a ton of pictures of him. Little family tree. Keep everything clear. And this I kind of blew up a little bit. It's similar to the sheets that I used before, just trying to get info out about each of my grandfather, his, his siblings, 2 younger siblings. A few more pictures. And then we move on to more about my grandfather's side of the family, so that would have been, that same guy, his family. And by the way, that was his obituary, is how that ended, because he did die when he was older, 1936, his headstone. Anyway, so this is his side of the family now, and his parents. A little bit about his mother, because I did not have any other pictures or any information aside from this on her. So, talks about her mother and father, her siblings. There's her mother's headstone, father's headstone. Here is his side of the family. Didn't have anything farther back with him either. Granted, he was born in 1837. There just wasn't pictures back then. Many, anyways. There's his father's headstone. A little close-up of his father's headstone, then his mother's headstone, which was actually back behind it right there. This is more about John Lee Allen, which was their firstborn son, so that's him. That's him with his mother. Love this picture. Love this. This was taken in about 1861 or 1962. Okay, so then I talked about America and Erasmus. This was his, his parents. Talked about their life a little bit. They had a pretty amazing family. These were tintypes that my grandmother gave me that I copied off. Starting from, let's see, youngest. I had information that my grandmother had collected about each one of them. They all survived infancy and adolescence, which was pretty amazing. So then they were like genuinely in love. Like, this was so cool. They had anniversary pictures taken really often, which would have been expensive back then, so they must have been pretty wealthy. A lot of pictures about them. These are all, quite old. Late 1800s. Their kids, a whole family picture. They got everyone together who was alive at this point. This was their 30th wedding anniversary. Let's see, my great-grandfather John Lee, more pictures of him and his siblings. This was Erasmus and America's 40th anniversary. More pictures of their kids. Let's see, Suzanne Lizzie was the first to die. This was America's obituary, which I found online. My grandmother didn't have it. I don't think I found this online. This is their 50th anniversary, and I found a little snippet about their anniversary. It was published in the paper. Pretty amazing to be married for 50 years back then. This was in 1910. And then America ended up dying just a few days after this. And when she died, she had a grandchild who died near the same time, and they actually put the baby in her arms in the casket. kind of a neat, well, sad but neat story. So yeah, their headstone, which looks like this. This is close up. Some of their kids' headstones. Okay, now on to Lilith's side of the family, because that's as far back as his side of the family goes. So here's her parents. Beautiful wedding picture. Love that. Them and a little bio about them. A few more pictures and a little bio about him, about Walter Seymour. My great-grandma as a baby. Birth certificates and stuff. Pictures of her growing up. Her sisters. It's her mother and her sister. Her mother died when she was young. My grandma Lilith's mother died when she was young. My grandpa was a police officer. I found these online on the Utah Digital Archives. That was really cool to find. Had this one already, but found actual articles talking about his police work. This talks about my grandmother and her death. I think she was only 40. So that would have been my great-great-great-grandmother. Just wait, Ellie. This is my great-grandmother. We're going up more. So he had to finish raising my grandmother, which probably was tough. Sorry, camera battery died. Anyway, so the family sheet with a little bit of information about each of them. My grandmother's 2 older sisters and her. A little bit more about my grandfather's police work. Cool article I found. He was the first pensioned officer in Ogden, Utah. He fought to get a retirement system going, so kind of a cool thing. Then my great-grandfather and his obituary. And I believe I found this on the Ogden, or on the Utah archive, newspaper archives. And then I got this off of Find a Grave, their headstones. My grandmother didn't have that. My grandmother had a lot of information, but I kind of picked up the pieces and added more. So here's more information about my grandmother and her sisters as they lived on. They seem to be very close. I know that my great-grandmother used to go visit her sisters in Ogden, Utah. So then I luckily was able to get a hold of, actually my grandma Betty was able to get a hold of obituaries for each one of the sisters, my grandmother. And so this is, one of my few repeats, but I do like to have things like this together when I can. I put this on her and my grandfather's section, of course. Yeah. Okay, now more about my grandmother's father. There's his mother, his father, and I don't have a picture of his father, but I do have his grandmother. Kind of odd. She was actually adopted, so that's why I don't have any more information on her. But, pretty neat stuff. She lived a long time. I think she was 80 or so. Then his other side of the family, the only picture that I have information about. This is her. Her and her husband's information, even though I don't have her husband, but she's holding their family Bible, which is pretty cool. Okay, then my great-grandmother's mother's side of the family, which I do have quite a bit of information on. They were a big Mormon family, like huge. They were some of the first Mormons in Italy, actually, so, and then they were some of the first pioneers in Utah. So anyways, this is her parents, her mother. I don't have a picture of her father, his parents, and then I even have each of their sets of parents. Really, really long time ago. They were born in the early 1800s, so yeah. And then here's her parents. These were the ones from Italy. Anyway, so I worked my way through. I change it up as needed for whatever pictures and information that I've got. So on this particular family, I did the mother and the father, some information about them and their marriage, their children, and their information when they were born, when they were married, who they married. Little bio on John. He died pretty young. I think he was only like 30-something, which I guess wasn't young for back then, but this was a really cool article I found in the Utah archives. I could tell it was him right away, but I typed in John Shaw. This came up, and he had this testimony that that they had put that this miracle cure, you know, had saved him. Well, he died like a few months later. So apparently it was no miracle cure. I think that he had probably lung cancer, which they wouldn't have known what that was at that time. But he had, you know, what he said, heavy lungs, inflammation of the lungs. But anyways, very cool to find that. Oh yeah, and that was his obituary as well that I found in the archives. So this is John Shaw's parents, Myrtillo and Harriet. I did a little bio on each of them. And at this point, to be honest, I was getting lazy. I didn't want to type all of this information out, so I copied it from my grandmother's genealogy book that she had put together. And it still works. I mean, it has all of the kids', you know, their name, their information, her name, her information, and then all of their children. And it even has more information than what I would have normally typed, which is their marriages. This was a neat letter that my great-great-great-grandmother Harriet had written to her sister. So here's a little bit about Myrtillo, his headstone, his obituary. They always had bigger obituaries for the men because, you know, back then the men were just more prominent than the women. Women didn't have a lot of rights. So then this is John Shaw's paternal grandparents, which would have been Myrtillo's, his parents. So this is how far back I got, if you can believe it. He was born in 1790, which this is, you know, taken when he was quite old. She was born in 1790 as well. And their information... Neat old picture that my grandmother had of their homestead. More information about John Shaw, stuff that I found in the Utah Digital Archives, newspaper archives. Headstone from Find a Grave. Find a Grave is a really great way to find headstones. Okay, then this is John Shaw's maternal grandparents. So, flip back here. Oops. So there we go back. That's his maternal grandparents. There was a John Shaw Sr., not to be confused with John Shaw Jr. Anyways, so back to his parents. Once again, very old pictures. He was born in 1793. She was born in 1801. Very happy to have these pictures. You can tell that they were taken when they were older, so probably, you know, mid to late 1800s, but still cool to have those. And then I moved on to Julia's side of the family, John's wife. And her side, and she is the most interesting story, I think, out of all of the research that I've done. Here's a picture of her, and she's kind of... I mostly had pictures of her when she was older. but I'll get into her story here in a second. This was her obituary. Once again, thank you, Utah Newspaper Archives. Find a Grave got me this. This was, someone typed out her story. I think it was one of her daughters. She was a pioneer of Utah. She came to Utah when she was 2 with her mother. And this story is just great. It talks about how she came over on a ship with her mother, which is her and her father. It was a 9-week trip over the Atlantic. 9 weeks on an old sailing ship. And her parents divorced as soon as they got here. You can imagine how tough that would be. This is the only picture that I have. This is a picture of her mother, and then this is like a drawing of her mother. And then her mother's headstone. Information about her parents. My great-great-grandmother Julie was born in Italy, as was her mother and father. And then this is Julia Gaydo Shaw's paternal grandparents. So this would be her parents. They were the first Mormons in Italy. They were the first baptized Mormons. I'm sure some Mormon family would be so happy to say, oh, we were the first, baptized in Italy. Well, I'm not Mormon, but it's still a cool story. So they were baptized. He took on a second wife shortly after they were baptized as Mormons. They got on a ship. This is a picture of the whole family. I don't know at what point this was taken, but I think these are his 2 wives, children. Anyway, so yeah, this is the ship they sailed over on. I was able to find their ship manifest along with their story because they were kind of a prominent Mormon family in Italy. Pretty amazing. Like, I couldn't imagine sailing on a ship. Their whole trip from Italy to Utah took 9 months. So 9 weeks on the ocean, 9 months total to travel by wagon train. This was the ship Juventus passenger list. It shows my great-great-grandparents and, well, great-great-great, however many great-grandparents, and Julia with her parents when she was 2. And this is his last page. This is his obituary, or his, his headstone. And him and her and her headstone. So that's it. That's my book.